when MoDOT redid the roundabout and that road, I'm surprised it wasn't widened. They kept it the same width. There's a telephone pole right smack dab in the way. I mean, you cannot, if you're leaving Redbud going on to North Henry Clay, you have to go in the other lane to make the turn. You cannot make that turn at all. I can with a small car, my truck, no. Trailers, they have to stop the traffic heading north. So as far as getting, coming from North Henry Clay onto Redbud, that's a problem when there's another car coming at it. Because there's nowhere, it's not wide enough. There's nowhere for them to go. So it just depends on the situation. But I really think making it one way would resolve a lot of the issues. But I know Jean's, her property's getting rutted now. So that's all about it. Is it okay for you, Jean? Because it's affecting her business.
Well, I think one of the things that I've noticed when I go back and forth between home and the business building, because I mean, there's virtually, 8 new businesses added there now, and once Dave is full. When you're turning from Henry Clay onto the alley there, Redbud, you have to stop on Henry Clay because there's no way to access Redbud until a vehicle leaves Redbud. So you are stopping traffic on Henry Clay that's been backed up. Now, not cars and cars, but 2 or 3, 4 at a time. And you're just waiting for cars to come out of the Redbud. And it's just kind of it's a little bit inconvenient when you have those businesses to get to and you have appointments and you're trying to get there and you have to stop and wait for traffic. It just never was meant for a 2-lane road. And so I'm not sure what there's probably not enough access there or easement or to get a 2-lane. But the neighbors were 1 to 2 years ago able to say that they agreed with the one way going from east to west. It would make it a lot more convenient for them as well, because I know it's a headache for them to try to get in and out of their properties. When we were squeezed back, when our business had to be uprooted and moved back, we were squeezed because of space allocation there and losing sidewalk access, losing Broadway access. We were forced to go to the alley. There was no choice for us. So I think this would benefit both Dave's businesses and our businesses and be able to be a little bit of a safer journey in and out of those businesses without the headache of trying to wait and stop traffic to let people in and out. It becomes a very obvious issue at that point.
You said east to west?
East to west. Yeah. And Dave, I appreciate Dave doing all the research. East to west is what the post office needs to deliver mail.
Yeah,
okay,
all
I
the
thought you
mail's
said
on the north.
the opposite.
Right.
How would that affect your customers when they're leaving your property? Would they then just go the wrong way on the one way?
Well, the one way, they'd have to get used to it. They'd have to go left and go out. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Yeah, east to west, they'd have to go left to go west to go out there.
Right. I thought about that too, right. Rick, I think.
I would have to
put a sign one way only.
Right. You have to do that. But like Dave mentioned, that pole there, you really do have to kind of go into that. You have to wait till cars or stops are gone past so you can ease out into that other, because you do have to cross the lane to get out onto Henry Clay there. That telephone pole is just where it's sitting, so.
You want to discuss the water pressure?
We've kind of managed that. We had city come in and they're managing. I don't know what can be done, but our water is, the more businesses and the more additions you have, probably it does have a bigger impact on water. I live in Setter's Knoll and we have horrible water pressure in Setter's Knoll, so it's kind of the same thing. So, I mean, if they could do something to adjust and alleviate that, I mean, especially running a salon like my mother runs up there, that became a point of contention with trying to rent air and do everything that they do in their business. So.
And the water pressure at Boone Corner, the problem is I can't even power wash my sidewalks on my parking lot because I just don't have enough water pressure. I know the engineers said average commercial water pressure is, I think, 48 to 80 or 50 to 80 pounds per whatever. I think the city came and checked ours and it was 48. But the interesting thing, when it goes across the meter and the backflow preventer, it drops 10 pounds. I don't know why. So at all our faucets outside, all the other units, it's averaging about 48 pounds per pressure. That's, you know, it's suffice, we can get by, we can turn the sink on, we can flush the stove, but not really adequate for commercial.
Now, do you have boosters on those?
No. That has been discussed. Who puts the booster on? Us.
Who flips the bill?
You can take off the meters. I don't know why there's a 10-pound drop across those two items. I haven't asked that question.
So I'm assuming it's been checked.
Yeah,
Just
Curtis-
at the meter? Just
I
at
had
the
a
meter?
plumber come out. Curtis verified the water pressure coming in. I had a plumber verify the water pressure inside the mechanical room. And also after it went through the meter and the backflow preventer. He said, I don't know why you're getting a 10-pound drop. So he's a plumber. I would thought he'd been able to answer that.
Is he the one that did the installation of the plumbing?
Yes. I mean, the backflow preventer and the meter was supplied by the city.
We had those same checks after we moved in and noticed that lack of water pressure. Cause I was out there power washing after the building, it was the power washing would cut out. I said, what is going on? It's a brand new power, it was the water pressure, so it just wasn't adequate enough.
I mean, we're out there trying to water the new sod, which should only take about an hour, it's taking 4. It's just, I mean, it's just real slow. So, that's all I have.
Any other questions from the board? All right, we'll look into it. Thank you. Moving on to public hearing, a proposed amendments to the city land use development regulations, presentation by Elizabeth Garvin. You're not Elizabeth.
I think I was supposed to introduce her.
Oh, I'm sorry. That wasn't on my note.
Okay, well, I'm Darren Ratterman, Development. Elizabeth Garvin, who works for Clare and Associates and also works for Allstate Consultants, who was hired by the city to do the land use code revision, and she's been working on it very heavily in the past few months, so.
Thank you.
Turn it over to her.
All right. Good evening, everyone. All right, Kyle gave me the clicker. Let's see what I can do. Some of you have seen this presentation. I appreciate your patience. Some of you are new to the presentation or haven't seen it for a little while. So let's go ahead and walk through. So again, I'm Elizabeth Garvin. I think I got my name tag out, so I know who I am. And I'm working with Wes Bolton and Brian Harrington. And we're taking up a chunk of Darren's time and Kyle's time also, and everyone else in the community who's been involved. And we're happy to let you know where we are with the land development code update. So just to give everyone some grounding in the project itself, when we got started a couple years ago, we worked with the community to define goals for the project. And came up with the 5 goals that you see here. Implement the new comprehensive plan, that was the 2020 comp plan. Establish priority improvements for Ashland, and those included drafting complete regulations. The current regulations have some gaps in them that are internally consistent and predictable, and include a full range of processes, so ways to process application that provide site-specific flexibility for problem solving. Is just sounding a little jargony here this evening, so we'll talk about what that means as we go through. Establish a locally relevant scope. So what we heard from the community was don't draft more regulations than the city needs, and balance those to make sure that we're reflecting what's important to the community. Make sure the code is easy to use. So you'll see as we go through it, it includes, sorry, this thing's on the timer, I'm gonna talk faster. It includes tables and additional information so that people who use it all the time can make sense of it, and people who only use it once or twice can make sense of it. And then finally, educate and collect feedback from the community about the contents and application of the code. So that's what we've been doing. So when we update zoning regulations and subdivision regulations, we don't just pull things out of the sky. We have guides and resources. For this particular project, our guides were the 2020 Comprehensive Plan, which has a great deal of content about land use in the city, the current zoning and subdivision regulations, and some of the content that they have that was useful, some of the content they have that wasn't useful, community input that we just talked about, the experience of your professional consultants and the experience of the community, so people have developed in the community or who live in the community, best practices in planning, legal research, and then feedback from elected and appointed officials. So we look at the comprehensive plan as our touch point for what the city wants to see and what we should be implementing with the code. The plan includes a pretty strong land use goal. The city's looking for development opportunities that are compatible with the character of neighboring uses, that are orderly and well-planned and minimize the impact on the natural environment. So we want some continuity of development. We want things that work well together. And we want to remember that we live in Ashland because we like the opportunity to be outside and enjoy the natural environment that we have in this part of the state. So you can see there are some specific objectives in there, and those are all in the plan if you want to go back and take a look at them. But we reviewed them as we were going through the drafting process. The plan also includes housing and neighborhood stability goal. In terms of how this works for the code, we are looking for a variety of housing types and styles, sizes, and lot dimensions. We understand that the community wants to provide housing for families, for our senior parents, for our kiddos as they get out of school and need a place to live and can afford to be. A strong downtown revitalization goal in the plan, so to support the transformation of downtown Ashland. Always an economic development goal. We want to keep the city's economic base strong and diversified. Quality of life. So what do we understand about the city from the comprehensive plan's quality of life goal? The people who live here enjoy the stable neighborhoods. They enjoy that the community is very walkable and could be more walkable, that it's beautiful. Sorry about that, everybody. And that they want to keep the small town family-friendly atmosphere. A little bit about transportation in the comp plan. We want to maintain safe and efficient transportation systems, so that's something we reflected in the code. And we want to talk about ongoing maintenance and improvements to the city's public utilities and services. So the first document we created in this process was the Land Development Regulation Assessment. If anyone wants to go back and take a look at that, it's in the city's website in the Document Center. This was our roadmap for the project, so we listened to the community and laid out the problems that we were attempting to solve in the code update, talked about things that were hot button issues in the community, and we framed the significant changes. We took that document out and got community input before we started drafting. Some of the important things that we heard from the community were a desire to improve the stormwater regulations, excuse me, update the regulations to support downtown revitalization, focus subdivision landscaping standards related to stormwater, stream channels, and tree preservation, establish a parks and open space dedication requirement, tailor the standards, so take the code from one size fits all to standards that work for downtown, which may be different than standards that work in suburban neighborhood areas or in along the edge of the community. Reinforce connectivity, so cars and sidewalks connect. Move the utility design review earlier in the process. We had some discussion about a few things that we couldn't fix in the code, but we wanted to make sure that we held on to the issue in case you want to take it up further. One of those issues was the problem that some homeowners associations aren't funded long-term, and the role they play in maintenance may not be taking place. We updated the sign regulations to conform with changes created by the United States Supreme Court. We created a process that we'll talk about in a little bit to clarify when existing development needs to come into compliance with new standards. And we looked at the relationship between the proposed zoning districts and the dimensions and the types of development that happen in Ashland. We also got some questions from the community about expanding housing choice. Talked about this a minute ago to make sure that there's housing for all of the different segments of people in the community that need to be housed. We talked about how to manage development at the edges of the city, at the urban-rural interface. And we got some feedback about outdoor lighting standards, balancing safety and efficiency. One of the things that we heard from staff and we heard from the community was that housekeeping in the land development regulations is critical, and that's the organization of the code, the fact that we want to put content together in a way that makes sense so users can find information. We wanted to organize the code in a way that the city can make changes to it over time. We want to state and reiterate that this is a living document, and we hope that you keep it up to date. We hope that it's organized in a way that you can add content to it. It is a really good framework, and you may decide moving forward that you want to add information to it. Some of the key updates in the draft regulations. We reorganized, and so you can see the new organization here. We have procedures, we have districts and uses, and then we have development standards, and then we have procedures. We organized information so someone can work their way through the code. The code is a little bit longer in its new iteration than it was previously, and that's because of the last bullet on here. We went in, and where the code has gaps, where someone is trying to figure out what they're supposed to do, we added additional detail about how the regulations work. And where needed, we added an illustration about how the regulations work. So our goal with some of this was to provide information in the code so an applicant can figure out what the city expects of them. We did make a few targeted changes to the zoning districts. We know that a city the size of Ashland doesn't probably need 20 or 30 districts, but actually the right number of districts with the right uses and design allowed in them help to guide development down the road. It reduces some ambiguity that we can have from collapsing everything into too few zone districts. So you can see here what the lineup is. The primary add here was the mixed-use districts. That was something that the community wanted to see. Mixed use is residential plus commercial in some form, can be in the same building or can be next to each other. So you can have vertical mixed use or horizontal mixed use. We created a use table that allows a simple comparison of the uses that are allowed in a district, or it allows someone who wants to put a specific use in to figure out what district they need their property to be zoned. So this is intended really for user friendliness. You'll see if you look at the draft, and I'm sorry that I didn't update this slide, the P's have been changed to A's, so we moved from permitted to allowed. The C's for conditional is still in there, and the X for prohibited is in there. We updated also the use-specific standards. So if you think about the wireless communication standards, there have been some changes to those by the FTC over the past few years, and so that's all worked in. So when you look at the draft, you can see the use-specific standards and where it's allowed. Additionally, all of the uses or use categories have been defined. So the goal with that is to make sure that when Darren sits down with an applicant, or really anyone in the staff position sits down with an applicant, we share expectations about what these uses are, what they mean, and how they can change. So the last big category of standards we get to are development standards. These are regulations that apply across different types of development. So whereas we might have 2 or 3 residential zoning districts, we have a whole category of landscaping, and it might apply differently in those districts. So we went through the code to ensure that there were complete standards in each section. Where possible, we drafted objective criteria. So objective criteria is along the lines of you should have 1 street tree per 30 feet of frontage. And so I'm not saying, and I can't remember off the top of my head if that's a standard in the code, but it's different from you should have landscaping. And the goal here is to, again, be clear with the applicants what the city is looking for, what the expectation is. So we are trying to move away from no standard or a more negotiated standard to shared expectations between cities and applicant about what's gonna go in on the site. I noted earlier that redevelopment can be challenging. If you think about downtown, if I wanted to renovate one of the buildings downtown and didn't have enough space for parking or didn't have enough space for landscaping, that might be the end of my project. Usually that's not what a community wants to see. We want to see the reinvestment in those older structures on potentially smaller sites. And so there is language in the code that allows an adjustment of parking standards and landscaping standards for redevelopment projects. And the changes we call proportionately compliant. So if you make about a 50% change to your building, you need to comply with about 50% of the parking. At the end of the presentation, I'll tell you about a conversation that we just had on that particular topic in our public open house meeting. We updated the sign regulations, the parking regulations, and added a park and open space dedication requirement with an optional fee in lieu payment instead of giving the land. That was something that we heard from the community. So in the subdivision regulations, we made sure to clarify all the steps to, in some cases, reiterate current regulations that had kind of just gotten lost in the cracks in the code or hadn't been as enforced in the past, but that are pretty important to the development of subdivision. We did update the stormwater standards. They're applicable across subdivision or other types of new development where stormwater might be needed. And then we took out some of the design-specific engineering standards. I think my colleagues probably love a good engineering standard, but they don't necessarily belong in the land development code. They can live someplace else. Finally, we get to the procedures, administration and procedures. So you'll find in the draft that there's a summary table for each of the procedures of who is the responsible reviewing body, who's the deciding body, where does an appeal go. We're trying to let applicants understand the steps that they need to go through to get approval. It is frustrating for an applicant to think that they can come in and get something approved in an afternoon when in fact there's a public hearing involved. And so we want to be clear in the code how that works. Within each of these procedures, there are review criteria. And the review criteria serve the purpose of saying, these are the things that are important to the city in reviewing your application. So we want to make sure that it is in conformance with the comprehensive plan, that you've provided all the infrastructure you need to provide, that you've met the landscaping standards. So you can see as you look at any of these procedures what those review criteria are. So I want to tell you a little bit about the outreach and opportunities for review that we've been working with staff on doing for the last probably 6 or 8 months. So we posted a full draft of the Land Development Code, in September. And that went up on the city website. So it was available for anybody to review. We started working with Planning and Zoning Commission in late 2023. I think we started in late September and we worked through October, maybe November. And we did multiple meetings to discuss the content of the draft and make changes according to comments and discussion from Planning and Zoning Commission. We posted those changes on the city's website in January. We did a narrated PowerPoint of those changes, of this PowerPoint that we posted in mid-February, so anyone that didn't want to read the code could listen to this presentation. We made a few technical changes in March, and so we wanted to make sure that anyone who wanted to see could check that on the website. March 12th, Planning and Zoning Commission had this issue on their agenda. They tabled it to wait for the 2 community meetings, so we did one virtually on March 28th, and we did one live this evening. There are a couple more slides. So something that we shared at both of the community outreach meetings, sometimes we walk through a conversation, we talk about all the changes we've made to the code and all the things that are going to happen, and we get people who are concerned that this is going to impact them immediately. And so we say, these changes they apply going forward. Your house, your business, they stay where they are unless there's something illegal or unsafe going on there. If you decide to make changes to your house or business, then they need to be in compliance with the new code after it's been adopted. So that's just, we want people to not go home from one of these meetings and think, oh my gosh, they're gonna, do X, Y, Z to me. That's not how code update works. So that's the end of that. I thought I'd give you just a super brief summary of what we heard at the last two community meetings. And for those of you that were able to join us, please bear with me, and everyone else, I'll just bring you up to speed fairly quickly here. So at the March 28th meeting, and I'm sorry, I can't believe it's April and I'm in denial, but I'm just gonna go with that. The substantive questions we had that could be something the city wants to tackle now or later. Let me stop here. One of the things that we want to encourage when you guys get to a point of having adopted this land development code is keep it as a living document. And by that, we mean review it regularly and update it regularly. Don't let it become kind of a historic artifact that makes it really hard to get development going in the city. So don't be afraid to make changes. At my firm, where this is kind of all we do, we recommend, depending on the complexity of the code and the size of the community, reviews either quarterly or twice a year. I think for Ashland, probably twice a year would work, but that's up to you. At least in that first year. We also recommend not making a slew of changes in the first few months. Just live with it, let it settle in, gather up a list of things that need to be changed. If something is keeping a significant development from going forward, maybe make a change for that. But for the most part, everyone who works with the code is gonna have to get used to the new code. And sometimes you find those solutions when you got to make the best of it. So that's our recommendation about code amendments going forward. But what we heard at the March 28th meeting was to provide some clarity in this draft about allowing construction and reconstruction of commercial structures on non-conforming lots. So the question was, if there is an existing structure on a non-conforming lot and something happens to it, it burns down, or something that we would maybe consider an act of God or a natural disaster, can they build back to that same footprint? Can they build back bigger? And so we could, the code says you are allowed to build on a non-conforming lot, but if we want to add some language about rebuilding in the face of natural disaster, that is a change we could make to this code before it goes through adoption. We also had discussions in that meeting about whether or not the city would need additional staffing to be able to implement this code. On the whole, we don't think so. We think that it's gap filling for the most part, providing the language that you need to make the code work. That's always a judgment call on the part of the city. If you decide you have a priority of some sort of enforcement or some sort of change, you can make staffing based on that. But it wasn't the intent to build this out so it becomes unmanageable. It is intended to be quite manageable for Ashland. I think that's all I remember from the 28th. You guys remember anything else from that? That's correct. Okay, so we had 2 citizens join us for the virtual meeting on the 28th. And then this evening, I want to say we had 6 citizens and staff and commission members and board members, so thank you. So this evening's conversation was pretty robust. Couple of things we talked about just early on. We had a discussion about this redevelopment idea. And so if someone wants to do redevelopment on an existing site, we have tension between providing enough predictability about the regulations and enough flexibility in the regulations to allow that development to go through. And this is tension that any community of any size is going to see for redevelopment. Redevelopment is challenging. And so, what we talked about in the group was, how do we make sure that staff is going to apply the regulations consistently? How do we make sure that the applicant can advocate for the things they want to see? And what are the city's priorities in redevelopment? So the way we've set up the code, it's fairly numerical when you get to an issue like this. So the code says how much change is being made to the square footage of the structure. And in that range of change, what is the percentage of that change to the overall square footage? And then can we apply parking and landscaping standards at that same percentage, right? So if you have to have, 6 trees, and I'm making this up, so don't go look for 6 trees in the code. If you have to have 6 trees and you do 50% expansion, then you probably only need 3 trees. It's kind of that, it's set up to be a math equation, which is a great starting place, but redevelopment has more moving pieces to it than that. So the conversation was about potentially, and particularly in the downtown area, would the city want to think about removing the parking requirement or adjusting the parking requirement in terms of that could stop new development? Would the city want to establish priorities in the standards that get applied? So, hey, the landscaping is really important to us, parking is not so important to us, or vice versa. And then we also, had one of our participants suggest that we look both at the percentage of change in the square footage and the percentage of change in valuation of the property. It adds a level of complexity that we weren't looking to do with this code, but it's a valid question, and so something we would turn back to the city for discussion. Some of the other questions that we talked about, things that we talked through, was the new code has expiration dates for for things that can expire. So like a rezoning cannot expire. You have to have notice in public hearing to change zoning, but a site plan could expire or a preliminary plat could expire. And so right now the draft code says preliminary plat expires after 2 years if you haven't started moving it into final and moving yourself into construction. And so we had a request to allow extensions to that for periods of a bad economy, such as a recession, when a project might not be moving forward, or such as the pandemic, which didn't necessarily give us a bad economy the whole time, but it gave us constraints on construction. And so that would be language added to the code. We clarified how those expirations would work on projects that have been already approved. They don't kick in until the new code gets adopted. So if someone's sitting on a preliminary plat, that 2-year period doesn't start running until the city decides to adopt the new code, and then the 2 years starts running. And then we had a conversation kind of as a group in the room about, does this process need more time? And so as the consultant who does this all the time, I will tell you that that's a question that comes up pretty much with every code, because people come to it at different places for different reasons. And my recommendation to the group was, no, I don't think the process needs more time. The code has been up for a while. It's been open for comment. We certainly worked with members of this board and with members of the Planning Commission to talk about it. But it may fall into, there are some things that may come up in the adoption process that you may want to see drafted into the code immediately. So those changes can take effect right away, or however city attorney wants that process to work. And then there may be things that you put on the list for the first round of edits, of amendments. And so, we understand the need to balance the comments that the community brings to the table, and obviously we will follow whatever instructions we're given. But our recommendation at this point is to allow people to make the comments, allow Planning and Zoning Commission to process them, and then decide what the city wants to do to change the code as we go forward. That's it.
At this time, we'll open up to the public comments,
Okay.
questions. All right, any staff questions, comments? No. All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
On introduction to the first reading, Council Bill number 2024-3, an ordinance to amend Chapter 2 as it pertains to compensation of the mayor. Laura needs to recuse herself, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll recuse myself, yeah.
All right. Leave the room or?
You don't have to leave.
Okay.
The,
Turn around and face
we had this on the agenda last meeting. Obviously, we did not have 4 present with the ability to have Lauren recuse himself, and as it is an ordinance, it does require 4 votes in the affirmative to pass it. This would simply just be renewing the monthly stipend for the mayor at $500. This is something that's been done, second mayor, I guess, has probably received a stipend now, so it's been going for a
Yeah,
little bit.
third,
now.
Gene received it.
Gene did?
Yeah.
So,
Because it's much smaller, but yeah, Gene's like 100.
obviously, if there's a desire from the board to discuss and change that dollar amount or do anything with it, this is your time as well.
What's the current stipend?
500 a month. And that has been consistent from Richard Ford, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't know if that dollar amount has changed.
Stephanie, I think you're the mayor pro tem, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're the presiding member in the moment.
Oh, okay, I was just thinking on the math, I mean, inflation is so bad.
It's 6,000 a year.
Yeah, I would consider upping it, but
Can you make a motion to do that?
sorry, I'm looking at the calculator. I would move to increase it to $550 a month. I think it's a 10% increase, it hasn't been up since Richard. I think didn't we just give state employees like an 8%?
We don't have no numbers, no, they got one.
Second?
I made the motion, second.
I'll second. Can we get a roll call vote for that?
All right, I'm gonna call Alderman Volkart.
Aye.
Alderwoman Old.
Aye.
Alderwoman Bell, can I call myself? Aye. Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Lewis.
Aye.
So that amendment's made to the ordinance.
It fails.
It fails because we only got, no, we got 4.
1.
You have 4.
Yeah,
No,
we
we
got
get
4.
3. We got 4, so it passes.
So
All right,
you,
so now
you've amended it
we
to
have amended the
550.
motion. We are going to, I will move the underlying motion. If someone will second that, I will entertain a second.
I'll second that.
All right, seconded by Alderman Lewis. Do we need to do a roll call?
So you need a first and second reading. It's an ordinance.
But yes. we do need to roll.
All right, roll call. Let's go again. Alderman Volkart.
Aye.
This is on 550.
This-
Alderwoman Old.
We'll let this second.
Nay.
Okay.
Alderwoman Bell, aye. Alderman Lewis.
Aye.
I'm sorry, out of order, Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
All right. That motion passes.
That's it.
All right, great.
Thank you, ma'am. Moving on, Council Bill number 2024-4, an ordinance adopting an annual budget for fiscal year beginning May 1st, 2024, and appropriating funds for certain therefore.
The ordinance before you relates to the passage of the fiscal year 25 budget. The budget presented is the final budget document for the fiscal year 25. The budget is a combination of department head requests, contractual obligation, rate analysis, and finally a representation of multiple meetings and workshops held between staff and city officials. Most notably within the budget is the purchase of new fleet vehicles for community development and the police department, increase in city liability, casualty, and asset insurance costs, increase in loggers' contributions for all departments, an increase in training budgets for both city officials and staff, the addition of the intern program, master planning for both the street and water departments, the mill and overlay of city streets, new asset management software for the public works department, new city website, and multiple capital projects for street and water and sewer. If you had an opportunity to look at the final budget report, you can see that under different line items, we do have everything listed out as far as what those funds are going to. Just as an example, if you go under contractual service agreements for the police department, it lists out all of their contractual service agreements and the amounts, as well as police equipment. I know I've had some questions about the tax being used. As you can see, the police department's budget itself has raised substantially from last fiscal year, and they have listed out all the equipment that they intend to buy, as well as memberships and training and such. It is our recommendation that you approve the ordinance as presented, and there will be a first and second reading on this evening. And once it is approved, it will go into our budget software, ClearGov, for the actual budget book. Any questions?
Any questions? All right. Can I get a motion approving Council Bill number 2024-4, an ordinance adopting an annual budget for fiscal year being May 1st, 2024?
So moved.
I have a second. Alderman Lewis.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Bell.
Aye.
Alderman Old.
Aye.
Alderman Plank. Aye. And Alderman Bogart.
Aye.
Do a second reading?
This is fall your agenda, it's on there.
Okay, got it. Council Bill number 2024-5, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Bartlett and West Construction LLC.
As we discussed the last meeting with Bartlett and West and the meeting prior, we have a draft contract for agreements with Bart West to allow them to do the design and construction of the wastewater treatment facility expansion. They proposed to do a DBIA contract, which they would go out and conduct 30% of the engineering required for the project. As we discussed last meeting, that gets them all their pipe quantities, sizes, and whatnot, so they can actually go out and get us that final price on what it would actually cost to construct the plant. So the intention of this contract would be to approve that engineering work for that 30% design, as well as some of the anticipated engineering costs for the actual bidding of those various items and development of that final cost at the end of that 30% design. And once we get to that 30% design threshold and get that cost from them, we'll be back in here to kind of discuss that cost and evaluate whether or not we want to move forward with construction or alternate our plan of action for that wastewater treatment expansion. So that would be roughly 180 days from finalizing this contract and giving them the notice to proceed. I do have one minor correction on my staff report. I did annotate that we would have some additional comments coming from legal counsel, so we did get those back earlier today. And we'll have this amended prior to the second read, but just for your awareness, I put $472,000, it'll be $492,000. There was a question on a $20,000 expenditure in the contract of whether that was inclusive to the 472 or in addition, and we were able to get that clarification earlier today, so that will be a slight change to that total price. That still comes in below the original 500 and some change $1,000 scope of work that they would have proposed had we gone through the conventional design bid build process. So certainly a cost that we've been contemplating for a long time now and is anticipated in the budget that we just had the first reading on. So,
any questions for Kyle? Can I get a motion to approve Council Bill number 2024-5, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Bartlett and West Construction?
So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
Alderman Bogart.
Aye.
Alderman Plank.
Aye.
Alderman Old.
Aye.
Alderman Bell.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Lewis.
Aye.
Council Bill number 2024-6, an ordinance to amend Chapter 14 Sewer and Water and Solid Waste of the Code of the City of Ashland.
This is pertaining to Chapter 14. Staff is providing the included ordinance to amend city code to reflect the new rate structure. Sewer user rates have not changed since 2018. However, the city has seen increases in costs pertaining to repairs, services, supply, and personnel, along with the added burden of having to expand the wastewater treatment plant that is approaching capacity limitations. The rate increase reflects a 4.8% increase for both the base fee and per 1,000-gallon fee for sewer services. For water rates, water user rates have not changed since the early 2000s. However, the city has seen increases in costs pertaining to repairs, services, supplies, and personnel. The rate increase reflects a 3.2% increase for both the base fee and the per 1,000-gallon fee for water services. So the fiscal impact, the base rate will change from $27.75 to $29 for sewer. The per 1,000-gallon rate will increase from $5.25 to $5.50 for water. The base rate will change, I'm sorry, that should be sewer. The base rate will change from $8.90 to $9.20 for water. The per 1,000-gallon rate will change from $4.71 to $4.86 for water. For an assumed 2,500 or 2,500 gallon bill, customer bill will translate from $61.54 to $64.10, which is a $2.56 per month increase. And staff recommends passing the ordinance.
Any questions for staff? Excuse me. No? Can I get a motion approving Council Bill number 2024-6, an ordinance to amend Chapter 14 Sewer, Water, and Solid Waste of the Code of the City of Ashland?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Alderman Lewis?
Aye.
Alderman Wilson?
Aye.
Alderman Bell?
Aye.
Alderman Ode?
Aye.
Alderman Plank?
Aye.
And Alderman Bogart?
Aye.
Council Bill number 2024-7, an ordinance authorizing the appropriation of funds to certain accounts with the fiscal year 2024 budget.
Staff is providing the included ordinance that is statutorily necessary in order to close the fiscal year. Political subdivisions preparing an annual budget and closing previous fiscal years must document, report, and pass an ordinance recognizing that deficit spending from the fund balance occurred during the fiscal year as proposed expenditures from the fund exceeded the estimate revenues to be received plus an unencumbered balance or less any deficit estimate for the beginning of the budget year. In fiscal year 24, the water fund will deficit spend, reducing from its fund balance approximately $550,100. This was planned and budgeted as part of the South Main project for fiscal year 24. This reduction in the fund balance is acceptable as the water department will still maintain and operate a fund balance well within policy guidelines. Water operating reserves shall be maintained at a level of 3 months of the fund's annual operating expenses. Estimated ending fund balance for fiscal year 24 is $830,000, approximately 5.91 months worth of operating expenses to include the funds contractually obligated in that fund. So we had discussed this earlier when we passed the fiscal year 24 budget that we would be spending out of fund balance in water. It's just necessary for us to pass an ordinance to recognize that and to have an approximation of how much we are spending in order to close out this fiscal year.
Any questions? Any further questions? No? Can I get a motion to approve Council Bill number 2024-7, an ordinance authorizing the appropriation of funds to certain accounts for fiscal year 2024 budget?
I'll make the motion.
Have a second?
One second.
Alderman Lewis?
Aye.
Alderman Wilson?
Aye.
Alderman Bell?
Aye.
Alderman Ode?
Aye.
Alderman Plank? Aye. And Alderman Bogart?
Aye.
Council Bill number 2024-8, an ordinance authorizing the appropriation of funds to certain accounts with the fiscal 2024 budget.
Staff is providing the included ordinance that is statutorily necessary in order to close the fiscal year. Political subdivisions preparing an annual budget and closing previous fiscal years must document, report, and pass an ordinance recognizing the deficit spending from fund balance occurred during the fiscal year's proposed expenditures from the fund exceeded the estimated revenues to be received plus any unencumbered balance or less any deficit estimated for the beginning of the budget year. In fiscal year 24, the general fund will deficit spend reducing from its fund balance approximately $70,000. The generator grant awarded calls for the city to pay for the unit in full prior to reimbursement. The generator was $88,324. The city is expecting a reimbursement from SEMA of $79,491.60, which is 90% of the cost. However, this reimbursement will take 6 to 9 months for receipt. As the city was obligated to pay prior to the reimbursement, a drawdown of the general fund balance for approximately $70,000 was necessary, as revenues for fiscal year '24 will not cover total expenditures. The ending fund balance for the general fund will still be within city policy. The city desires to maintain as a goal an unassigned general fund of 30% of prior year's budget operating expenses. The ending fund balance for fiscal year '24 is estimated to be $1.2 million, leaving approximately 9.35 months of operating expenses to include all of our contractual obligations. So a little bit of history about this, because I know this has been going on for some time. Several years, during COVID, the city did a grant to be able to get a generator for this building. That was done by Mid-Missouri or regional planning. And it's taken 3 years just to get to this point. And there has been some back and forth as to our obligations, their obligations, what was expected. There was some miscommunication, I think, between us and Mid-Missouri Regional Planning, but the generator has been paid for. It is on its way. The pad has been set. Unfortunately, we're not going to see a reimbursement, I would say probably for 9 months. I have submitted all the documents to Mid-Missouri Regional Planning. They are the ones that are in charge of this grant. So we're just waiting on them to submit those and then for review.
Any questions for staff?
No. Can I get a motion approving Council Bill 2024-8, an ordinance authorizing appropriation of funds to certain accounts for fiscal year 2024 budget?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Alderman Wilkart.
Aye.
Alderman Plank.
Aye.
Alderman Old.
Aye.
Alderman Bell.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
And Alderman Lewis.
Aye.
Council Bill number 2024-9, an ordinance amending city code as it relates to sewer and water impact rates.
Staff is providing the included ordinance to amend city code to reflect new impact rates and fees. Sewer fees. Sewer impact and collection fees have not changed since 2022. However, the city has seen increases in costs pertaining to repair services, supply, and personnel, along with the added burden of having to expand the wastewater treatment plant that is approaching capacity limitations. The rate increase reflects a 5% increase for both the impact and collection fees. For water fees have not changed since 2022. However, again, the city is seeing increases in costs pertaining to repair, service, supplies, and personnel. The rate increase reflects a 5% increase for meters. The fiscal impact is included in the attached ordinance. Water meter installation fee increase will have no impact to the water department, as the increase is to offset cost of time and materials for meter installations, and increases to impact and connection fees will produce minor revenue increases across all connection sizes. So the attached ordinance shows the new impact and connection fees for sewer, as well as the new costs to purchase a water meter for new construction.
Okay. Any questions for staff? Can I get a motion approving Council Bill number 2024-9, an ordinance amending city code as it relates to sewer and water impact rates?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Alderman Wilkart.
Aye.
Alderman Plank. Aye. Alderman Old.
Aye.
Alderman Bell.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
And Alderman Lewis.
Aye.
Moving on to old business, ordinance number 1461, an ordinance adopting an annual budget for fiscal year beginning May 1st, 2024, and appropriating funds for sewer.
So that was the first ordinance that we went over. If there's not any questions, then
Good questions? Can I get a motion approving ordinance number 1461, an ordinance adopting the annual budget for the fiscal year beginning May 1st, 2024?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Alderman Lewis?
Aye.
Alderman Wilson?
Aye.
Alderman Bell?
Aye.
Alderman Owen?
Aye.
Alderman Plank?
Aye.
Alderman Volkart?
Aye.
Moving on to new business, I have none. Moving on to reports. Mayor's report, I would like to see us, if we can, instead of having Mitch come every year to ask for the liquor, can we change that ordinance and see if we just, that time frame, we might have to change the dates here and there. If we just make it a standing,
We'd have to have a discussion with the YMCA. I mean, as I said, the dates just changed, the time has changed a little bit, but it could be looked into.
Could we defer that power to you, like parade permit style, like where, like, and like we would have the power to bring it up and veto you, but initially you would have to check off?
Yeah, so the park board desires to really take a hard look at park regulations and park rules over the next handful of months, so we'll kind of put that on their radar as they look to incorporate some new rules for recommendation to you guys, so. we can address
Fully
that
in
as part
favor
of
of
that.
allowing all the booze as long as we enforce the dogs on a leash regulation, because that is not gonna be really out of hand. These huge dogs roam around and people are so rude about it. They really are. I'm gonna start taking pictures and turning them in.
Don't hold back what you really think.
I hate dogs. Mainly because their dog owners are impolite and don't want animals.
and that is my report. City Administrator report.
A whole bunch of dates for you. Citywide garage sales, April 27th. Citywide cleanup, May 2nd, so that's the bulk item cleanup for your personal property.
Can you repeat that date, sorry?
April 27th for garage sales, May 2nd for cleanup. That's all in the newsletter, so we'll take a look at that if need be. Tomorrow night from 7 to 8:30 is the next Boone County Master Plan Virtual Open House, if you want to tune into that. There will be a session in Ashland later this month, but I'll get that date and time out when it's a little closer. SBDC Leader Breakfast, April 18th, that morning, so again, I've sent that out. It's on SBDC's Facebook page if you need more information and to find the ticket link on there. Southern Boone Chamber Business Showcase, we've talked about that one a little bit as well. That's May 9th and 10th. May 9th is an evening thing with the 10th being the all-day business showcase and job fair. So the city will have a table down there if you'd like to come stand at that table or network down there. You're welcome to come hang out with us. Steal some thunder from Todd since we received the Lauber City Official Training handout. May 10th is the closest one in Jeff City. If you can't make that date work, they do have some other locations that may be agreeable, so just let us know if you want to go to that one. We'll get you registered for it. The Missouri Municipal League Elected Officials Training, I know we've talked about this one before as well, but June 6th and 7th in Columbia. I believe they do have some virtual options, so if you have any desire to attend all or part of that, just reach out and we'll get you signed up. Speaking of the YMCA and the Park Board Cleanup Day, April 20th, 9 a.m. They'll be meeting at the middle school to kick that off. I think we updated this a little bit at the last meeting, but the Park Board, at their meeting next Monday, will be reviewing the contract for the City Park Master Planning Project and reviewing that and making recommendations, so that'll be on the board agenda for the next meeting potentially. That proposal has come in well below budget, so we're pretty excited for that. That'll enable them to really hit the ground running and start some of those improvements once that master planning project's done. We have received the flagpole for the municipal center here. We're just working on getting the install lined up. And that is
Did we decide we're gonna install that
still spitballing a couple ideas, but probably gonna have to go
on this back pad?
on that back pad back there.
Moving on to City Attorney's report.
Just very briefly, the Missouri Association of Code Administrators has asked me to do a half-day training in 2 weeks on administrative search warrants. I'm very excited about that. You all have an administrative search warrant ordinance. It's 4 hours. Part of that is a Q&A with folks all over the state. My hope is I'll be able to come back and give my cities a perspective on what other folks are doing on that subject. That's it.
Thanks, sir. Police Chief's report.
Scott is out sick, so he will let me know that when he returns.
Moving on to Alderman reports. Alderman Lewis.
No report.
Alderman Wilson. No report. Alderman Bell,
No report.
Alderman Old,
No report.
Alderman Plank,
No report.
and Alderman Booker.
No report.
Moving on, to general comments from the public. I see none. It's your time to shine, son.
It's always good to be here, Mr. Mayor.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Go home.